Today we're going to talk about signs they are being manipulated. And look, we can sit here and talk all day long about the actual manipulation technique that people use against us, but there are so many of them that it's really difficult to provide a comprehensive list. And so I think today it might be easier and more productive to talk about signs that somebody is manipulating you that are not related to what the other person is doing, but rather the type of reaction that you're noticing within yourself. Let's get right into it. Now, regardless of the specific technique that a person will use to try to manipulate you, if they're trying to manipulate you, they are essentially trying to control your behavior. Now, I think there are non-problematic forms of manipulation, like maybe trying to influence someone to get out of a toxic relationship, and then there are insidious types of manipulation where it doesn't really matter to you what the other person wants, you just kind of want what's best for yourself. This latter type of manipulation is what we're talking about today. Now, how exactly a person tries to control your behavior will depend on a number of different things. One of them is what type of manipulation you best respond to. Another one is how you're responding to their manipulation tactics in the moment, kind of paying attention to what's working, what's not. And the third one is their own personality. For example, let's say that you want to spend the holidays at home with your partner and not travel. You're talking on the phone with your mom, who wants you to come to your childhood home for the holidays. She doesn't really care what you want. She's just kind of determined to get her way, to get what works best for her. So maybe she knows that historically you've responded angrily when she's tried threatening you, saying things like, well, I guess your father and I will need to reconsider putting you in our will. She knows that historically speaking, you have not responded well to threats. But maybe she knows that you're much more malleable to guilt. So if she says something like, no, it's fine, it's just that I had a health scare at the doctor and I was really looking forward to spending time with the family while I can, that is going to get under your skin better. So she goes the guilt route, at least at first, because that's the manipulation technique that you tend to respond best to. But while she's guilting you, for some reason, you're not budging. Let's say you really want to stay put this holiday season. And maybe you keep saying, no, Mom, you said you had a health scare last time I didn't do something you wanted to. This isn't going to work on me. So she realizes, guilt is not working right now. Let me try something else. Let me try the silent treatment. So she says, okay, Hannah, I'm going to hang up now if you're going to be so callous. And this is where her personality also factors in. You know, if your mom isn't a very explosive, outwardly angry person and she instead prefers to be passive-aggressive, she might prefer not screaming at you and threatening you, and instead take the route of silent treatment. You see how what specific manipulation tactics someone is going to use depends on history, context, and their personality. Now, once you can understand that, what are the signs that someone is manipulating you? Number one, you're afraid of their reaction. When you're expressing your needs or setting a boundary or saying no to something, it's likely that in the past, the other person has made it clear to you that they don't really respond well to not getting their way or to being called out. So they've conditioned you into not speaking up for what you want by punishing that behavior. Could be with anger, with aggression, with explosiveness, with the silent treatment, with any sort of reaction that produces a negative internal state in you. For example, let's say that every time you call someone out for yelling, they start screaming even louder and run out and slam the door. That is like a given. If I stand up to them, they are going to have this explosive reaction. They've conditioned you to fear standing up to them. Or anytime you tell someone that they've hurt your feelings, they start to get cruel, snarky, mean, vicious, invalidating, dismissive. In both of these examples, you have learned to be afraid of their reaction. They've trained you not to speak up for yourself. So that's number one. If you're afraid of the other person's reaction, there's a good chance they have manipulated you in the past and they might be manipulating you now. Number two, you feel a sense of obligation. You feel responsible somehow for their feelings, their experiences, what happens to them. Let's say that you're trying to communicate something, and you get this nagging feeling in the back of your mind that you just need to make sure that the other person is okay above even your own well-being, that you need to keep the peace in the system and so forth. Don't get me wrong. I don't believe in hyper-individualism. I don't buy into the modern lie that we need to only consider our own well-being. But if someone is making you feel like you need to prioritize the well-being of another person or the system over your own well-being, there's a good chance that they're weaponizing enmeshment, codependency, hyper-collectivism, or something along those lines. So if they're giving you the message that you need to do XYZ thing to keep the peace in this family system, or to appease this person, or you need to do XYZ thing for me because you owe me, or you need to put this other person over yourself, there's a good chance they're weaponizing a sense of obligation to get what they want. And pay especially close attention to anyone who tries to buy their obligation with money, gifts, favors. Acts of kindness should be selfless. They should have no expectation of reciprocity. It should be like, I'm doing this nice thing or giving you this because I care about you and I want to show you, not because I think I'm going to get something in return. Otherwise, if they're given with the expectation of reciprocity, that's just emotional blackmail. So that's number 2, is a sense of obligation. Number 3, you feel guilty. Guilt is normal to feel when you've done something wrong. But if you're in an interaction where you're setting a boundary, you're saying no to something, you're standing up for yourself, and suddenly you start to feel guilty, that's a pretty big red flag that the other person has started to manipulate you. Maybe you're suddenly worried that you hurt the other person, but when you actually stop and think about it, you didn't say or do anything wrong. You were just expressing a need. They just keep saying things like, you'll see when I'm gone, then you'll be sorry. Maybe they're threatening to do something to hurt themselves if you don't give in to what they want. These first 3 signs, fear, obligation, and guilt, are the acronym FOG of emotional blackmail. Emotional blackmail is a subtype of manipulation. It's what people do when they're trying to get you to do something they want, and they're holding something over your head, either fear, obligation, or guilt. Before we continue with the video, I just wanted to let you know that I now have a new course offering available. By now, many of you know the Connection course, a 4+ hour guide on the skills required to healthily initiate, maintain, and end relationships. But now I'd like to introduce Goal Getter, the mindset and habits of winners. This is a 2+ hour course on how to think and take action like a winner, and apply proven techniques to your specific goal. Maybe you have a big goal in mind, maybe you've tried to accomplish it before and haven't had much luck, like maybe you want to try a new fitness routine, get a better paying job, save up for a big purchase, expand your friend group, increase your GPA. It could really be any type of goal: professional, academic, health-related, leisure-related, social, emotional, spiritual, you get the picture. Or maybe you don't have a specific goal right now, but you just want to build the mindset and habits that set you up for success in the future. So what this course contains is 2 hours and 16 minutes of lectures, 11 lessons, 33 concrete steps. These are exercises, journaling prompts, homework assignments, where you actually apply the lectures to your specific goal, and access to a community forum where you can connect with potential accountability buddies and other people taking the course who have a goal in mind as well. I tried to make this course as helpful as possible in a couple of ways. One is that I put the exercises after each lesson so that after you learn the knowledge, you apply it to your specific goal. I tried to make it very engaging with PowerPoint slides, concrete examples, a mix of lecture and exercises, and these exercises from evidence-based psychological theories I think are pretty fun to do. So how it's split up is part 1, you have setting the goal. So this is where you get an introduction to the course, goal setting, and planning how you're going to take action towards it. That part is 27 minutes long. Part 2 is the mindset of a winner. So this is where you learn the mindset of the most successful people and apply proven interventions to help you embody this mindset more fully, and that one is 67 minutes long. And then part 3 is taking action. So learning and applying the actual habits of winners in the action stage using 8 steps. This one is 41 minutes. It's currently $99 during the launch sale, after which it'll be back to its full price of $120. You can click the link in bio or up here. Back to the video. Back to the signs that you're being manipulated. Number 4, you begin to fear that the other person is going to withdraw from you. Now, sometimes when manipulators have exhausted all of their techniques, or sometimes even earlier, they begin to instill a fear of abandonment in the other person. They might begin to stonewall, or to give you the silent treatment, or to threaten to leave, or to give ultimatums. So then you'll do whatever they want to just keep them present, because you don't want to lose them. And your initial agenda for what you wanted out of your life or that interaction is kind of out the window. It's not relevant anymore because your number 1 priority right now is avoiding losing this person. A really great way to see if someone is serious about being done with you or they're just trying to manipulate them is to call their bluff. Let's say that your friend had a conflict with another mutual friend of yours, and they say, you have to pick. It's either me or this other friend. If you then go, no, I'm not doing that, or okay, I pick them because they're not making me do an ultimatum, and they immediately backtrack, they didn't mean it. They were just trying to get their way with you. They were just preying on your fear of abandonment, and when they realized it didn't work, they pivoted to a different manipulation technique. So if you start to notice yourself when you're having an interaction fearing that the other person is going to abandon you, start to pay attention to why that might be. It could be a personal trigger of yours, but it could also be that they're giving off signs that they're going to leave if you don't give them exactly what they want. Number 5, you have to keep repeating yourself constantly. Regardless of what the other person is saying to you, if you notice yourself needing to make the same point over and over and over again, it's a red flag that you're being manipulated. Either they're not listening, they're steamrolling over your point, or they just continue to disregard a boundary that you've set, so you need to keep setting it again and again and again and again. For example, if you get a call from somebody trying to sell you radiators, and you notice that you keep having to say, "I'm not interested in a new radiator, please stop calling this number," and they keep finding sort of loopholes. "Oh, but what if I send you an email with this information about our radiators?" Or, "Oh, are you sure?" And you keep needing to repeat, "I'm not interested in a radiator. I'm not interested in your radiator." They're pushing your boundaries because they're trying to get their way over what you want. That's manipulation. Number 6, you feel ashamed. In cases of very malignant manipulators, they might manage to make you feel like you're a very bad person for not doing what they want you to. And this usually comes from a projection of shame that they feel. So if you come to someone with a specific concern or a need that's not being met, a person with a certain personality type is going to feel very, very threatened by the implication that they're not perfect. And so unconsciously, they become all bad. They become consumed with shame. And they need to do something with that shame because they don't know how to regulate it, so they're going to vomit it onto you. And they're going to do so by making you feel exactly as bad as they feel. And oftentimes people that do this, they're very adept at seeing the deepest, darkest aspects of your shadow self, and they know exactly how to push on certain pressure points so that you feel ashamed. Quick little distinction here between guilt and shame. Guilt is when you feel like you've done something wrong. Shame is when you feel like you are a wrong person. You are bad for something as a global person. If you're talking to someone, you haven't done anything worth feeling ashamed of, and you start to feel shame, back it up. Really assess what is going on, because that's a huge sign that you're being manipulated. Because manipulators know once they can get you to feel shame, you are distracted from your initial point. At that point, you just want to make sure that you are not as bad of a person as they're accusing you of. At that point, you're on the defensive. Number 7, your game plan is now completely different from how you went into the discussion originally. So maybe you went into the discussion with a very clear idea of what it is that you want, what it is that you don't want, what you want to communicate, how you want to proceed in a situation. But after talking with them, suddenly your game plan has changed by 180 degrees. Let's say you went into the call wanting to tell your mom that you're staying home for the holidays, but she's made such a compelling argument for why you should go to your childhood home, maybe using some of the other manipulation techniques that we discussed. And by the end of the conversation, you think, "Oh, okay, I guess it does make most sense for me to come see you over the holidays." Now, caveat here is it's perfectly normal and even recommended to have some porosity in terms of accepting feedback or persuasion from other people. Sometimes other people have a good point, and if you cut yourself off completely from feedback, you become too rigid, and it comes to the point where you're not hearing other people's good points and you're not considering their perspectives. Like maybe your mom really is terminally sick. Okay, so you went into the conversation saying, "I'm not coming home for the holidays," but you found out that she's terminally sick. Totally normal for you to say, "Okay, I will come home for the holidays. You have a really good point as to why I should." But if it's happening very chronically, that you go into a discussion with someone with one plan and then by the end of it, you've completely changed your trajectory, there's a good chance they're manipulating you into always doing what's best for them and disregarding what's best for you. And number 8, you went into the interaction with a concern of your own. But now somehow the focus is on what you did wrong, and now suddenly you are on the defensive. This is probably because the other person is engaging in something called blame shifting or deflecting, where instead of accepting responsibility for the ways in which they've hurt you, they have now redirected the conversation to the way that you wronged them. Because again, manipulators know that is the most effective way of getting someone off their game plan. is to put them on the defensive. You might come to them and say, I'm really disappointed in the way that you handled XYZ. But then they bring up something that you did 2 years ago, or they're really unhappy with something that you've been doing recently. They're shifting the blame onto you. Look, human interactions are complex, and it's important to hear out the other side's explanation. But if it's becoming unilateral, where you're always the one supposed to apologize for something you did wrong, even when you have brought up a concern of your own that maybe the other person should be taking responsibility for or apologizing for, you're probably being manipulated. Like if you come to someone and you say, hey, I've been feeling X, Y, and Z for a long time. And the other person says, okay, but why did it take you so long to say something? Because of exactly the way you're reacting now? Like when somebody is bringing a concern to us, that's really not the place to bring up our own concerns, and unless they are extremely directly linked. But even then, it's strongly recommended to take responsibility and apologize for what the other person is bringing to you before you shift the focus to what you're dissatisfied with. So in summary, 8 signs that someone might be trying to manipulate you. If you are afraid of their reaction, if you feel a sense of obligation to them over yourself, if you feel guilty, if you're suddenly afraid of losing them, if you need to keep repeating yourself constantly, if you suddenly feel ashamed, if you completely changed your game plan from the beginning of the conversation to the end of the conversation, and if you went into the conversation with a concern of your own, but now the focus is on what you did wrong, the other person might be trying to manipulate you. One last thing that I'll mention is that some of these things, like feeling afraid of someone's reaction, feeling guilty, feeling ashamed, might have less to do with the other person than with you. In certain situations, if you have certain personal triggers, certain traumas, certain history of relational issues, where let's say somebody constantly made you feel ashamed of something, it might not be that the other person is shaming you, but rather that a personal trigger is getting activated. So if you notice any of these signs, it's not necessarily that you're being manipulated, but it definitely is a sign to assess what's happening, press pause, look at the interaction, and determine whether you are. I hope this was helpful today, and I'll see you soon.